Story 1. Napoleon's return from exile appears to be an event that was poorly portrayed in history, allowing writers to perpetuate the narrative. Story 2. Hong Xiuquan and the Taiping Rebellion. A Chinese man failed the civil service exams multiple times and experienced a nervous breakdown. He then had a hallucination revealing that he was the brother of Jesus and initiated one of the deadliest civil wars in Chinese history. Story 3. The One Unkillable Soldier is literally an action movie protagonist in real life. He survived 2 bullets in his left eye during the same charge, amputated a few fingers himself when the doctor refused to do so, and survived several plane crashes and being cast away. He endured the Boer War, World War I, World War II, and more. He personally told Mao Zedong that communism is nonsense. Story 4. An accused murderer tries on hand gloves, pretending they don't fit and getting exonerated because of it. Story 5. The lead-up to the First World War saw numerous specific coincidences, with every attempt to prevent the conflict failing in one way or another. From Archduke Ferdinand's driver taking a wrong turn onto the street where Ferdinand's assassin was having a consolation sandwich, sulking over having failed an earlier assassination attempt that day, to a diplomat having a heart attack and dying moments before signing a crucial document. It is as if the forces of the universe conspired to ensure that the war would be inevitable. What I mean is not merely that the war broke out, but how the events leading to it were not as straightforward as one might think. Consider, for instance, the Christmas truce. We all know it happened, but the fact that enemies who had previously shot at each other met and even played soccer is remarkable. Story 6. In June 1667, Dutch Admiral Michiel de Ruyter led a raid up the River Medway, near the Thames, and significantly defeated the entire English fleet while they were still moored. They captured the English flagship, the Royal Charles, and sailed it back to the Netherlands. It was such an incredible humiliation for the Royal Navy that, if you saw it in a movie, you would think it was too exaggerated to be real, but it actually happened. Story 7. The battle off Samar involved a small United States task force successfully driving off the entire Japanese center force, which included the Yamato, by fighting so hard that the Imperial Japanese Navy believed each American ship was one class above its actual classification. The Imperial Japanese Navy thought the destroyers were cruisers, the destroyer escorts were destroyers, and the light carriers were fleet carriers. The Yamato alone weighed more than the entire United States force that entered battle against it. This battle included one of the smallest ocean-going United States warships engaging in a gun duel with an Imperial Japanese Navy heavy cruiser, damaging it so severely that the Imperial Japanese Navy scuttled it after the battle. Story 8. The Battle of Remagen. As the Americans closed in on Germany and reached the Rhine in the closing months of World War II, the Germans had successfully destroyed every last bridge except for one that was already wired for demolition. When Brigadier General William M. Hogue was sent to liberate Remagen, he was shocked to discover the Ludendorff Bridge still intact. It was generally accepted that there would be no bridges left, but Eisenhower believed that if there was a bridge remaining, it should be captured. Hogue then decided to defy a direct order to link up with Patton further south and sent his men on a bold charge to capture the bridge. At the same time, Nazi troops that had fled across the bridge to escape the Allied advance were frantically trying to detonate the charges to destroy it. While some of the charges went off and caused damage to the structure, the bridge still stood because an Allied artillery shell severed the wires to the detonation charges before they could be triggered. After a valiant effort, the bridge was captured, opening an Allied beachhead into Germany. The first man across, Alexander A. Drobick, spoke about the experience. While we were running across the bridge, it may have been only 250 yards, but it seemed like 250 miles to us. I spotted a lieutenant standing completely exposed to the machine gun fire that was fairly heavy at this point. He was cutting wires and kicking the German demolition charges off the bridge with his feet. That took plenty of guts. He's the one who saved the bridge and made the whole thing possible. The kind of guy I'd like to know. Incidentally, Sergeant Drobick became the first man to successfully cross the Rhine and capture German territory since the time of Napoleon. With the tireless work of the Army Corps of Engineers, the bridge survived German mortar attacks, artillery barges, and hundreds of air raids, defended by the single largest anti-aircraft battery arranged in the entire war. It was nearly obliterated by a near miss from a railgun, and SS troops who tried to float downstream during the night to sabotage the bridge were spotted by special spotlights mounted on tanks. Naval mines sent downstream were caught by nets, and the Nazis even attempted to destroy it with V-2 rockets but missed. After 10 days, the Ludendorff Bridge collapsed on its own, killing several engineers who were trying to keep it standing. However, its capture allowed 6 divisions to cross and establish a beachhead in German territory, likely shortening the entire war by weeks or even months. Story 9. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was marked by a failed first attempt. The car took a route that led it to stall right in front of Gavrilo Princip, resulting in a catastrophic aftermath. It seems like sensational writing typical of Hollywood. Story 10. The Battle of Kassel Itter involved American and French prisoners of war, along with German Wehrmacht soldiers, who fought against the SS. The SS held a few high-value French prisoners in Kassel Itter. A small American unit went to liberate them before they could be executed. They encountered some German soldiers and joined forces with them to protect the prisoners. The 3 groups successfully defended against the SS until more American reinforcements arrived. Story 11. There was a famous naval battle just off the coast of the Netherlands where Dutch warships were fought by men on horseback. The French cavalry won, capturing all 14 warships with no losses. Even if you consider that this took place during a record cold snap that froze the freshwater bay completely, it's still a pretty outlandish tale. The details of its authenticity are still being debated by historians, though all records indicate that a total surrender on the part of the Dutch Navy did happen. The issue is whether the cavalry actually charged them head-on or simply went out as a formality to negotiate their surrender while they were stuck in frozen-over waters. Either way, it's an exceptionally rare occurrence, and one that has been commemorated in paintings and numerous articles in the years since. Story 12. The Street Nazir raid during the Second World War involved British commandos who rammed a ship full of explosives into a Nazi dry dock, resulting in a massive explosion the following day while many German officers were inspecting the wreckage. According to an account of the raid, just before the Campbellton exploded, Sam Beatty was being interrogated by a German naval officer who remarked that it wouldn't take long to repair the damage caused by the Campbellton. At that moment, the ship detonated. Beatty smiled at the officer and said, "We're not quite as foolish as you think." The events sound reminiscent of a big-budget action movie, making for an extraordinary read. Story 13. Press conference at the Four Seasons Landscaping Supply Store in Philadelphia. It is located next to an adult novelty shop. This would have been the moment Veep jumped the shark if they had attempted it. Story 14. The Life of Robert Smalls. Robert Smalls was born into slavery on April 5, 1839, in Beaufort, South Carolina, to Lydia Polite, an enslaved woman, and possibly John McKee, her enslaver. The McKee family held Smalls and his mother in bondage. When Smalls was 12 years old, the McKees sent him to Charleston as a hired enslaved laborer. Smalls worked on ships in the Charleston harbor. During the Civil War, Smalls' enslavers forced him to work as a pilot on the CSS Planter, a Confederate steamboat that transported arms and ammunition. On May 13, 1862, Smalls and the rest of the black crew commandeered the boat and sailed to Union lines. On the way, Smalls and the crew freed Smalls' wife Hannah, daughter Elizabeth, and son Robert Jr. They disguised themselves and, using the knowledge they had gained as maritime workers, sailed the boat past Forts Sumter and Moultrie. Smalls surrendered the Planter to the United States military, thus securing the freedom of everyone on the vessel. Smalls became the first black man to become a pilot in the United States Navy. As the captain of the USS Planter, Smalls fought in 17 battles during the Civil War. During Reconstruction, South Carolinians in and around Beaufort elected Smalls to the United States House of Representatives. He served from 1874 to 1879 and again from 1881 to 1887. As Southern Redemption, a violent effort to usurp political power from black Southerners and Republicans, swept South Carolina, Smalls maintained his congressional seat, although he briefly lost it in 1878. Smalls retired from Congress in 1887 after William Elliott unseated him. While serving as a representative of South Carolina, Smalls helped secure funding to improve the Port Royal Harbor and appropriations from the government for the use of the citadel. Smalls also fought to secure full citizenship and equality for Black Americans. He resisted Jim Crow, opposing segregation in the United States Armed Forces, railroads, and restaurants. After retiring from Congress, Smalls was appointed the Collector of Customs in Beaufort. He served in this position for 2 decades, despite dissent from local white people and the Jim Crow social, political, economic, and legal regime. During Reconstruction, Smalls purchased the McKee home in Beaufort. He and his family lived in the home for almost a century after the purchase. In an act of graciousness, Smalls allowed his former enslaver, Mrs. McKee, to remain in his home after she fell ill. Robert Smalls died on February 23, 1915, and was laid to rest in Beaufort at Tabernacle Baptist Church. He died not only as a hero to his Black crewmates on the USS Planter and his family, but also to the Union and the people of South Carolina. Story 15. 2 students go to a pub and complain about the quality of the wine. A fight starts and escalates out of control, lasting 3 days and resulting in over 90 people killed. Story 16. Mad Jack Churchill. A man who fought in World War II with a bow, arrows, and a broadsword. He also played the bagpipes. Story 17. Operation Mincemeat during World War II. The British government took the corpse of a homeless man, faked documents, and dressed him up to look like a soldier. They placed a fake letter in his pocket stating that the British would invade Greece and Sardinia, then launched him from a submarine toward fascist Spain. The Spaniards discovered the body and informed the Nazi Party about the upcoming invasion, prompting them to move troops from Sicily to Greece. As a result, they were caught off guard, and the Allies successfully captured Sicily, which they used as a launching point for the liberation of Italy. It is truly remarkable that this plan worked. Story 18. One of my favorites is that once, the winter was so harsh around Paris that packs of wolves gathered into a large group, crossed the frozen Seine, and began hunting people in the streets of Paris. It is alleged that this ended after a confrontation in the streets led to a battle between people and wolves on the steps of Notre Dame, where the pack leader was killed. The remaining wolves fled, and for much of the year, nearly all wolves were wiped out in the north of France. Of course, Paris and Notre Dame looked very different at that time, barely a small city with a half-built church. How is this not a movie already? This is the story as I was told while researching the tale of the Beast of Gavaudan. If you're going to offer alternatives, please do so with class and support. Yes, I used a colloquial term that is also a famous miscommunication. I hope your recognition of irony is sharp enough to see that jumping on it is unnecessary. This is how interesting things die and why people hesitate to share new or captivating information. Story 19. The Four Seasons Total Landscaping press conference would have been rejected for an episode of Veep because it was so ridiculous. Story 20. The Battle of Saragari involved 21 soldiers fighting against 10,000 to 12,000 soldiers. The unbelievable odds have inspired filmmakers to create a movie about this historic event. Story 21. American World War II veteran Desmond Doss helped a wounded Japanese soldier during the war. I don't remember this often, but some say that while Desmond Doss was running to rescue, the Japanese soldier's guns malfunctioned while trying to fire at him. This did not make it to the movie Hacksaw Ridge, however, as many viewers would find it unbelievable. Needless to say, Desmond Doss was a believer in God. Story 22. Sail of Endurance to Antarctica. The ship was stuck in ice, sank, and the crew was trapped on an ice field. It took them almost 1.5 years to walk over the ice and sail with small boats to the uninhabited Elephant Island. Afterward, part of the crew sailed 1,300 kilometers in a small lifeboat through roaring southern storms to a small island with a whaling station. They could not reach the side with the harbor, so they hiked over mountains to elevations over 1,000 meters. In the end, everyone from the 28 men survived the trip. Story 23. Alexander the Great approached the island city of Tyre and decided, instead of attacking an island, I will make the island part of the mainland. He built a land bridge to connect Tyre to the mainland so that he could attack and capture it. Story 24. The giant tsunami wave that occurred in Lituya Bay, Alaska, in 1958 was supposedly 1,700 feet in height. Story 25. When the Irish film Michael Collins included a scene of the British Army opening fire on civilians at a Gaelic Athletic Association match, killing spectators and players alike, some people were outraged about the director being inflammatory and including unnecessary scenes to demonize the British. So we had to open a history book and say, no, it happened. There was more than one bloody Sunday. Story 26. I create many short tornado documentaries, and honestly, many moments I have encountered sound like they were taken straight from an exaggerated tornado action or horror movie. Natchez stands out to me as particularly striking. It was the second deadliest tornado in United States history. It became so dark that people had to light candles to see. It straddled the Mississippi River, sank essentially a fleet of ships, and caused such destruction that many people experienced profound religious crises by the end of it. Xenia is another significant event. During that storm, students fled their school just seconds before a bus smashed through the wall behind them. It's very frightening. I have been genuinely amazed at how many real tornado moments resemble what people might consider over the top and unrealistic if they were included in a movie about a tornado. Story 27. That far-right Norwegian man who pretended to be a police officer and attacked teenagers on an island sounds like a plot from a mediocre Nordic noir book. The eccentric wealthy Danish man who invited a reporter to his submarine and ended up murdering her and dismembering her body raises questions about humanity. Who does that? It would likely be rejected as a movie script for being too bizarre. September 11th. Story 28. Charles VI of France and his grandson Henry VI of England both became mentally ill in their 20s. Their relatives responded by deciding to fight each other over the regency. Much of the animosity was provoked by existing tensions between two members of the royal family. In Charles's case, it was his brother Louis, Duke of Orleans, and his cousin Jean the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy. In Henry's case, it was two of his cousins, Richard Plantagenet, the third Duke of York, and Edmund Beaufort, the second Duke of Somerset. Charles and Henry's respective wives, Isabeau of Bavaria and Marguerite of Anjou, were both accused of being evil and greedy foreign harlots, allegedly cheating on their husbands with their main political supporters. Louis of Orleans and Edmund Beaufort were killed by their rivals, prompting their sons to seek vengeance. Subsequently, the instigators of those murders, Jean the Fearless and Richard Plantagenet, were also violently killed by their enemies, inciting their sons to declare, "Vengeance is mine." Charles and Henry's immediate family members eventually took sides in the rivalry between the two royal factions. Charles's only surviving son aligned with the Armagnac-Orleans faction, while Henry's wife and only son associated with the Beauforts. Charles and Henry both died insane, and it remains uncertain how much they understood about the state of their family and kingdom. One might hope they were blissfully unaware, as the reality was undoubtedly troubling. Their deaths differed in nature. Charles died of natural causes while Henry was secretly murdered. The parallels in their stories are striking, reminiscent of a television show where the writers grew bored and chose to recycle old plots. Story 29. Operation Cowboy, where a mixed group of Americans and Germans saved part of the Lipizzaner stallion herd from the advancing Soviets, who intended to eat them. Mark Felton wrote an excellent book on this topic titled Ghost Riders. It's an enjoyable read. Story 30. Capture of the Dutch fleet at Den Helder in 1795. The sea froze and allowed the French hussars to defeat and capture the fleet with a cavalry charge. Story 31. If a movie was set in the 1600s with a character named Tiffany, people would say it is fake and anachronistic. In fact, Tiffany was a name used in the 1600s. Author Nicola Cornick first discussed the Tiffany effect in 2018 after learning about the phenomenon and encountering the term. She explained that the name Tiffany derives from Theophania, a name for girls in medieval England and France. The Old French form, dating back to around 1200, was Tiffany, and the spelling Tiffany first appears in English around 1600. However, if a historical fiction writer were to name an English character Tiffany in an early modern European setting as early as 1600, the audience would likely perceive it as inaccurate, associating the name with contemporary times, particularly the 1980s when the name reached peak popularity. Fellow author Joe Walton coined the term Tiffany problem in 2019 to refer to this phenomenon. Story 32. Major Digby Warder of the 1st Battalion fought in World War II, always carrying an umbrella and a bowler hat. He never wore a helmet. He once used his umbrella to disable a German soldier and the armored car he was driving. He saved a priest who was under heavy fire by saying, "Come with me, I've got an umbrella." Captured and later escaped. He was known for his courage and even helped a German truck out of a ditch while disguised as a Dutch citizen. He once fought while naked because shrapnel had cut the back of his pants. Story 33. Not an event per se, but a group. The Nazis were so fundamentally evil that they inspired numerous groups in fiction. George R.R. Martin even expressed concern that they distorted people's perception of good and evil in much of fiction and fantasy. He disliked purely good or evil groups, but there was essentially nothing redeeming about the Nazis. He wrote that if they were a fictional group, he would dismiss them as simplistic since they were so clearly evil. Story 34. A sitting U.S. president attempted a coup, was impeached twice, was convicted of 34 felonies, was proven to have connections to Jeffrey Epstein, and was elected again with more votes than the first time. Story 35. I forget the name of the incident, but during World War II, the Allies were attacking a castle in Germany. The forces stationed within the castle were so brutal that the regular German troops joined the Allies in the assault. It sounds unbelievable, but I did look it up at the time I read about it. I'm sure someone can provide a reference. Additionally, there is a story about a Norwegian soldier who consumed a large quantity of amphetamines and went on a rampage against the Nazis. Story 36. How is the 1904 men's Olympic marathon not near the top? Some highlights include the first person over the finish line, who was awarded the medal and met the president's daughter. He had actually given up and was driven to the end before the car broke down, forcing him to walk the rest of the way and then pretend he had won. The actual winner was given rat poison to keep him going and crossed the finish line in the arms of his trainers while his feet were kicking in the air as though he were walking. There was also a competitor who ate an apple, got sick, and took a nap while still finishing ahead of most of the racers. Additionally, one athlete was chased off the track by wild dogs. This is absolutely incredible and sounds completely made up. Story 37. I would have to say the Holocaust. It blows my mind that the hatred of a particular group could result in such systematic mass murder. For what? Story 38. Operation Mincemeat. The British dressed a random deceased individual in a military uniform, placed fake invasion plans in his pocket, and dropped him on the shore of Spain. The Spanish discovered the body and the invasion plans and informed Germany. Believing the invasion plans to be genuine, Germany sent an army to Greece, which was exactly what the British intended, as they were actually planning to invade Sicily. Story 39. Pope Stephen VI ordered the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, to be exhumed and put on trial. Formosus's heavily decayed body was dressed in papal vestments and propped up on a throne while Stephen VI presided over the trial. He was accused of perjury and illegally ascending to the papacy. Unsurprisingly, the deceased pope was found guilty. As punishment, Formosus's papal vestments were stripped off, his blessing fingers were cut off, and his body was thrown into the Tiber River. Story 40. Wilma Roberts was born prematurely into poverty and as an African American. She contracted polio, received leg braces, and was told she would never walk normally. Tired of these limitations, she removed her brace and eventually became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in sprinting at the 1960 Rome Olympics. You thought Forrest Gump was far-fetched? She truly accomplished that. Story 41. The flagship of the Swedish Navy promptly sank in the harbor after its launch because the shipbuilding crew made some basic measurements errors. The person who was struck by lightning 7 times and survived. Story 42. Stanislav Petrov literally saved the world from nuclear destruction by not reporting a missile launch when he was in command. He believed it must be a malfunction, even though all his computers indicated otherwise. It was indeed a malfunction. If he had reported it, there would have been several billion deaths. Story 43. I remember when the movie Fury came out, And many people complained about how unrealistic it was for a single tank crew to hold back an entire German company for hours. Meanwhile, in real life, Audie Murphy accomplished exactly that by himself in World War II using an M2 on a burning tank destroyer. Story 44. The Battle of Castle Itter involved political prisoners holding down a medieval castle during World War II. Some were Olympic athletes. At one point, German soldiers arrived, but this group had gone rogue and was actively fighting against Germany. They provided assistance. American soldiers eventually arrived because they had sent an Olympic runner to seek aid. Audie Murphy was a notable figure during the war, and a movie was made about his military exploits. The filmmakers had to downplay certain aspects because audiences would have found it hard to believe that someone actually accomplished some of the things he did. Story 45. Hands down, September 11th. There is no debate. A group of terrorists stole 4 jet planes, flew 1 into the Pentagon, and 2 into the World Trade Center towers. Both of them collapsed. Story 46. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand has a direct narrative link to a Japanese softcore adult film actor conducting a terrorist attack in downtown Tokyo, told through the parable of the F-104 starfighter. Story 47. The Battle of Castle Itter. An SS officer who was part of the Austrian resistance, a Wehrmacht battalion, and an American rescue party with a tank named Besatten Jenny defended French prisoners of war in a medieval Austrian castle from elite SS troops right before victory in Europe Day. Story 48. The Battle of Karansebes was a conflict between Austria and the Ottomans, in which the Ottomans failed to appear yet were still declared the winners. The Austrians suffered from one of history's worst friendly fire incidents, resulting in the loss of hundreds to thousands of lives, while the Turks did not arrive until the battle had concluded. Story 49. The Soviet Union traded some warships for Pepsi, which made PepsiCo a major naval powerhouse at that time. Story 50. It's sports history, but the underdog Boston Red Sox lost in extra innings in Game 7 to their hated rival in 2003. Then both teams went all out in the offseason to reload, including the best player in the league almost going to Boston but getting snatched by the New York Yankees. They played again with Boston going down 3-0, a deficit never overcome before, only for the Red Sox to come back and break an 86-year curse to win the World Series. Story 51. The Monkey Hanging of Hartlepool. The people of Hartlepool accused a monkey in a French uniform of being a spy and hung it after it did not defend itself in court. Story 52. That time in World War II when United States troops teamed up with a French tennis star and German soldiers to defend a castle from the Waffen-SS. Story 53. Almost founding father of the United States, James Otis, wrote in a letter that he wished to die by having God strike him with lightning. Sometime later, he was standing at his door watching a storm when he was struck by lightning and killed instantly. Story 54. Albert Roche's career. They made a movie about him called Captain America. He was refused entry into military service during World War I in several cities because he was too short. Eventually, he managed to enlist by finding a town that couldn't meet its recruitment quota. Roche ended up single-handedly capturing over 1,000 German soldiers and freeing many captured Allied soldiers. He was once captured, and during interrogation he managed to free himself, kill his 3 interrogators, rampage through the entire area, free about 40 Allied prisoners, capture as many Germans as he could, and return to the French side with all his loot. On another occasion, there was a machine gun nest no one would approach because it would kill anyone nearby. He volunteered to eliminate the nest by himself. Not only did he neutralize the machine gun position, but he also returned with approximately 9 prisoners, who were carrying their own machine guns for him because they were too heavy for a single person to carry. There were quite a few more incidents in his remarkable career. Roche eventually became part of a French delegation that met the King of England and was one of the men who lifted the coffin of the unknown soldier buried at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Story 55. How the British took control of India still amazes me. They essentially walked in and declared their intention to control the region. Story 56. An illiterate game show host, known for being racist, was elected president after bragging about being a sexual predator. He botched the response to a pandemic, resulting in thousands of deaths. After losing the election, He incited an insurrection and stole classified intelligence, which he kept in his bathroom. He was also found guilty of fraud and liable for rape. Then he was elected again. Story 57. The capture of Fort Douaumont during World War I was significant as it was the largest and most important French fort in Verdun. One German sergeant, armed with a rifle, took the fort without a shot being fired. Story 58. The Tabor Bridge Bluff. Two of Napoleon's most flamboyant marshals, Lannes and Murat, crossed an Austrian-held and mined bridge in their full regalia and successfully convinced the Austrian officers that there was an armistice under which the Austrians had to hand over the bridge to the French. According to one account, when an Austrian sergeant, seeing the ruse, protested, Lannes feigned offense that a lowly sergeant dared to address the Austrian commander like that, leading to the sergeant's arrest. Story 59. I have a small personal list of movie and video game depictions that were more grandiose in real life. Spoilers ahead. William Wallace. In the famous film Braveheart, starring Mel Gibson, Wallace's execution is rather quick, where he is tortured for a few minutes and then decapitated. This is a watered-down version of the torture the real-life Wallace endured before finally being decapitated. It's quite gruesome. Desmond Doss. There is another comment here talking about him. I wanted to mention that at the end of the film Hacksaw Ridge, Doss gets wounded by a grenade and is carried by his friends out of the battle. In real life, this scene happens at night, and Doss refuses to be carried, instead telling his friends that they should carry others. Doss then proceeds to crawl while under fire from enemy snipers and tanks, eventually reaching safety. This would have been an impressive scene to include in the film, but the movie altered it and cut out many remarkable feats to fit its length. Blackbeard. I have not watched any films featuring Blackbeard, although I'm sure there are many. Instead, I am comparing the death of Blackbeard depicted in the video game Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. In the game, he gets shot once and then slashed twice before falling over dead. In real life, his body was found to have been shot 5 times and slashed 20 times. I believe he continued to fight even after sustaining a slash to his neck. I feel like the video game depiction was mild in comparison to the real story. I might have gotten some of these historical facts wrong. I welcome any corrections. Story 60. The Battle of Karansebes involved the Austrian army mistaking their own forces for Ottomans while out scouting, leading to gunfire between the two. The ensuing panic resulted in many casualties, forcing the army to withdraw from the city. The Ottomans arrived a few days later and took the city without difficulty. Story 61. The Nazis spent a significant amount of money making a Titanic film, during which the first director was executed for clashing with German officers who acted as extras. After the film was completed, the censors decided it was too depressing and refused to allow it to be shown. The ship used as a stand-in for the Titanic was converted into a prisoner of war and concentration camp holding ship, but it was not marked as such. In the final days of the war, Allied planes bombed it, resulting in more deaths on the fake Nazi Titanic than on the real one. Story 62. The Peninsula Campaign in the American Civil War witnessed the Union's brightest young general, who possessed a significant advantage in manpower and resources, being halted just within sight of potentially ending the war. This setback was orchestrated by a Confederate commander whose strategy was to march his troops in a circle within clear view of Union scouts, creating the illusion of having a larger force than he actually commanded. Story 63. In the movie Midway, a character runs to a downed fighter plane on the aircraft carrier's deck and uses the guns to shoot down a kamikaze plane that is about to crash into the carrier. I assume that was a Hollywood invention, but it actually happened. Story 64. The Glomar explorer was involved in recovering a Russian submarine from the ocean floor in plain sight of the public, without anyone being aware of the true purpose of the operation, known as Project Azorian. A Gulf-class Soviet submarine sank at approximately 5,000 meters in the Pacific Ocean. The Central Intelligence Agency wanted to recover it, but they needed a strategy. They constructed a specialized ship and presented it to the public as a vessel owned by Howard Hughes for mining nodules from the ocean floor. The ship was massive and featured a large derrick-style crane in the center. The CIA hired personnel from the southern United States because they were believed to be better at keeping secrets. These individuals were taught enough Russian to navigate safely around the submarine. The outcome of the mission remains uncertain. The CIA claims it failed, while others argue otherwise. Recorded footage confirms that some Soviet sailors' bodies were recovered and given a proper burial at sea from the Glomar explorer. Story 65. The caning of a sitting United States senator by a sitting member of the House of Representatives is considered the point when any real civil and reasonable discourse about slavery ended. It marked a moment in American history when the threat of a civil war became a tangible reality. Senator Charles Sumner was giving a speech one day about whether Kansas should be allowed to enter the Union as a free state or a slave state. He criticized some of his colleagues, particularly Senator Andrew Butler from South Carolina, who was not present to defend himself. Sumner questioned Butler's character, accusing him of taking a mistress to whom he has made his vows and who, though unattractive to others, is always lovely to him. Though deemed immoral by the world, is chaste in his sight. Let her be impeached in character, or any proposition made to restrict her from the extension of her wantonness. And no level of extravagance or boldness is too great for this senator. He also ridiculed Butler's speech after suffering a stroke, stating that Butler cannot open his mouth without making a blunder. Butler's cousin was a United States representative named Preston Brooks. Upon hearing of Sumner's speech, Brooks was furious that his cousin had been insulted. He considered challenging Sumner to a duel but deemed him a mere blowhard. Instead of a pistol, Brooks grabbed his cane, walked over to the Senate chambers, approached Sumner's desk, and fiercely attacked him for a full minute, breaking the cane into multiple pieces in the process. When he was finished, he left as if nothing had occurred. Sumner sustained severe head injuries and was unable to serve for 3 years. The northern states regarded him as a martyr. Brooks eventually resigned, but the southern states viewed him as a hero and re-elected him. Southerners sent him hundreds of canes, and sitting members of Congress took pieces of the broken cane and fashioned them into pendants to wear around their necks. Southern newspapers praised Brooks as a hero. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.